When you're starting off in photography or videography, a zoom lens becomes invaluable for run and gun situations. This one though, hits the sweet spot for the best lens for travel and everyday shooting. Let's revisit the Sony 18-105 f4, the lens that always keeps me coming back. In this video, we're talking about how this 10-year-old lens still holds up today and how it could be your next lens if you still don't own it, or any zoom lens at that. We are getting lots of options for the Sony E-mount system, especially for APS-C, thank God. But out of all of them, this one continues to be in my kit. This was one of the first lenses that I bought with my Sony Alpha 6500, especially since I didn't know how serious I was going to take this. Photography and videography in general. I bought and sold many lenses, but I ended up returning to this one in particular when I had my Sony FX30. When I bought this lens, I was looking for something that I could just leave on my camera, yet get the most value out of it. I ended up using this mostly for travel for the short day trips that I take with my wife and friends, as well as for church for doing general photo and video coverage without having to go back between different lenses. And I generally use it for anything that's shot under the sun, literally. But more on that later. When it comes to sharpness, it's decent overall, but more so in the middle, then getting softer on the edges. But if you really want to get to see this lens shine, use it in well-lit situations with studio lights or simply shooting outside in the sun. Otherwise, your low-light shots are really going to make your images look like potatoes and less crispy like French fries. But where this lens shines is not so much in the sharpness, but in the wide focal range from 18-105, which is 24mm to 157mm full frame equivalent. For most people and most situations, the 18mm in APS-C is wide enough for landscape shots and general establishing shots, whether you do photo or video, while 105mm is long enough of a reach for things like ceremonies, seminars, or just taking photos of things far away. The best part of the zoom is that it's all internal, and this is ideal for gimbal setups, so you don't have to go ahead and rebalance your setup. But even without a gimbal to keep your footage from being too shaky, it's also got Sony's optical steady shot. Pair this with any camera with in-body image stabilization, and your footage is butter smooth. In regards to weight, it's not a hassle to handhold your setup, especially when this lens only weighs 482 grams or 1.06 pounds. A lens similar to this weight that I also liked using was the Sony 16-55mm f2.8 at 494 grams. But the focal range was less than this one, of course. Another advantage of using a zoom lens is using one filter for different focal lengths. Instead of buying a prime lens for wide angle, one for medium angle, one for telephoto, getting the same filter in different sizes is a hassle. Usually I buy the biggest filter, which is 82mm, and just use step-up rings for all my other lenses. This has a 72mm filter thread, and I already have a step-up ring that goes ahead up to 82mm. Normally for protection, I would stick a UV filter on here. But if you're a little more advanced with your videography or photography, you may use a ND filter instead. I've been using the Freewell's 2-in-1 ND filter and CPL filter lately to remove reflections and follow the 180-degree rule by maintaining my shutter speed twice my frame rate. Unfortunately, one of the ways that this lens shows its age is the absence of additional buttons, despite being one of Sony's G lenses, their premium set of lenses, like right below G Master. But it does have a power zoom switch. I use the zoom rocker built into the Sony FX30. I only wish they updated this lens to have extra buttons, aperture ring, and maybe make the images a little bit sharper, like other Sony's full frame lenses, like the Sony 16-35mm f4 G lens. That would be sweet. Another thing to note about this lens is that no matter how much you zoom in or out, you'll notice that it is not great for getting decent macro shots because of the minimum focus distance being 1.5 feet or 45 centimeters. I'm not a fan of using this lens for top-down shots for unboxing, because as soon as I try to bring the product closer to the lens to show those small details, it immediately goes out of focus. So I'm left desiring a more macro experience without having to buy a macro lens. At the minimum focus distance and beyond, the lens has no problem tracking. It's silent, responsive, works well with AI autofocus for those latest cameras. Face and eye autofocus, no problem. But if you really want a manual focus though, consider that it is a fly-by-wire mechanism, like the current other lenses of the Sony lineup. It's relatively consistent when you rack your focus, so it's not always going to hit the same exact mark if you move it back and forth from the same exact spots. Plus, don't count on this lens being parafocal, which means that your focus will not stay the same when you zoom in and zoom out, though your focus is locked off manually. But if you're buying this lens, I'm gonna assume for the most part, you're using autofocus anyway. And no matter what focus mode you're using, you may notice the focus breathing. Don't even bother, because this is also not in the list of supported lenses for focus breathing compensation either. For one of Sony's first G lenses on the Sony E mount, there's no additional aperture ring like the G lenses these days, but it does have a constant aperture of f4 when you zoom in and out, unlike your kit lenses, which change aperture. So ultimately, when you have a kit lens and you start off with an aperture of f3.5 on the widest end, as soon as you zoom in, your aperture goes to 5.6 on the long end. This is tedious if you manage your shooting in manual mode, especially for video. Of course, you can work around it. But how much is this all gonna cost you these days? Well, the lens was originally selling for $648, but at the time of this recording, you could even buy it for $100 less for new. But since I've been buying most of my crop censored lenses used, I was able to find this one for $350. For someone who has yet to experience the different focal lengths from wide angle to telephoto angles, this is a great all-in-one lens to introduce you to the different perspectives. And ultimately, this is a great tool to help you decide what other lenses that you actually want to use in the future. If you're looking for your first lens, if not your next zoom lens, this lens will help you get all the angles that you want for an affordable price. And even if you are a seasoned shooter, you know how invaluable it is to have this focal range for the cost. But yeah, for Sony, you could get the full frame G Master lenses for your paid work. But even this could get you most of the way there until you do. So does this lens really hold up after 10 years? Yes, absolutely. This is a one lens, fit all situations under the sun. But if you shoot in a lot of low light situations, then you may want to consider this lens over here.